Leave your ego at the door and get ready to be raw. This is Strength to Overcome, where real men find their strength in weakness. All right, guys, welcome back to the Strength to Overcome podcast. I'm Ryan here with my co-host Matt. This is episode 29, and we're really excited to be joined by an amazing guest this week. Patton Dodd is with us. He is the author of The Father You Get and the Ones You Make, Believe in, and Become. Patton, we're really excited to have you on the show. Thanks for being here, brother.
Thanks, Ryan. Thanks, Matt. I'm glad to be with y'all.
Yeah, really excited to kind of dive into your story and, doing a little research before we hopped on, reading a little bit about, what you wrote. It seems like it's a new publishing that you've got out, and, just to give our folks, because I think it's going to talk to our audience quite a bit with what you've got to say today. But, your book, The Father You Get, is kind of described as a lyrical, emotional meditation on the failures and glories of dadhood. It's kind of an extended wrestling match with the mysteries of a distant parental figure and an attempt to bridge the gap between the fathers we get and the fathers our hearts yearn for. Really excited to dive into that with you today. But tell us a little bit first about yourself, kind of where you're from, and we'll kind of get the details on the book as we go along.
Yeah, that sounds great. So I'm coming at you from San Antonio, Texas, where I've lived for about the last 10 years. And I am a former journalist and I'm a former academic. For the last decade, I'm working here in Texas. It's been for a family foundation where, among other things, I oversee communications for this foundation, but we also run a storytelling initiative about economic hardship issues here in San Antonio. And so storytelling is just kind of in my DNA, whether it's in journalism, working as a professional writer, doing the work I'm doing here in San Antonio. I've always been, a writer, drawn to narrative, drawn to truth telling, about myself and about the communities that I come from. And so this is my second memoir, actually. I wrote a memoir when I was 27 years old, which is not something I think is a very good idea for most 20-somethings to write their first memoir. But I don't know, I was drawn to do that back then. That was 25 years ago and now, so this is memoir number 2. I've written a bunch of other stuff in between, articles and essays, and kind of been published all over. But a few years ago, like during COVID, I knew that it was time for me to kind of get to work on something that had been on my mind for a long time, which is wrestling with myself in light of fatherhood issues. I had a really messy upbringing with a mess of a man, like a lot of us do. And I also had a pretty tricky relationship with some father figures in my life. And here I am deep into my fatherhood of my own at this point, but had a lot of insecurities about how to be a father. And so, the only way I really know how to deal with stuff is through writing. And so ultimately I just knew I needed to sit down, reflect, create, and find my way through my own story. And so that's what's in The Father You Get.
Patton, I've got questions already firing through my brain here as we learn about your story. I'll admit, live that I have not read your book yet. And, Ryan and I talked about this before getting on, hoping to have read through the material before we got on. And, my life is crazy with kids and work and a lot of jobs in the house. I know Ryan's got a 3-month-old. And so, we're going to be vulnerable here and say, hey, I haven't read the book, but can you unpack a little bit about your description of you had a messy upbringing, it was a tough situation. Can you unpack that just a little bit, if that's okay? Just so the audience can get an idea, as well as myself and Ryan, on what did that look like? Was it a single parent home or situation that you're in that you could talk a little bit about?
Yeah, I will say, first of all, to anyone who hasn't read the book, the good news is that it's short and it's kind of a page turner. I mean, I wrote it to kind of be a page turner. So I think if you do give it a try, whether you're reading, you can listen to it on Audible. I tried to write something that, you get from the beginning to the end of pretty quickly, because I also struggle to read, to find time for reading in my own life. And so I think short books are kind of a blessing. But to answer your question, Ryan had asked where I'm from. The book actually opens with a story of me trying to answer that question. Every time someone asks me, where are you from? I have a hard time answering because I'm from all over. We moved around a ton when I was a kid. and, deep South, Tennessee, Alabama, Mississippi, moved to the Northwest, Northern California, and then Colorado. And then I've moved around a bunch as an adult. And when I talk about that with people, they assume, so was your dad in the military or something? And he wasn't. We just moved around because he couldn't hold down a job. He just he was always losing work and burning bridges. And so we would chase the next thing. And the reason was that he was an addict and he kind of drank his way through life. And our house was chaotic and uncertain. And we didn't often, there were years where we didn't know where next week's groceries were going to come from. Anytime I needed new shoes or clothes for school or whatever, there was just a ton of uncertainty and drama around that kind of basic life matters. These are not, like, my story is not, it's dramatic, but it's not especially dramatic. A lot of people grew up this way, but I don't know that we talk about it well, are as transparent as we could be about the wounds that leaves with us. And so my dad, one of the weird things about my father is that he was a drunk, but he was a closeted drunk and kind of a secret drinker, even though everyone was aware except for me. And one of the stories of my book is about my own lack of insight into what was happening in my family. My mom obviously knew what was going on. My older sister did. Obviously, my dad's coworkers and his extended family knew about this guy, but it was kind of hidden from me, or I just I don't know if I chose not to notice or I just didn't notice. And so my life was one of upheaval and, like I said, constant change and economic hardship. But the source of it was kind of lost on me. And so I was deep into being a teenager when kind of the penny finally dropped and I realized, oh, my dad is a mess. He is causing this, he's drinking this harm into our family. And so in some ways he was just your basic drunk, like any alcoholic. But, every family that's broken is broken in its own way. The themes might be the same. There's obviously things that are consistent from one dysfunctional family to another. And yet your unique situation is unique to you. And it took me a long time to kind of contend with not only what was going on in my family, but with the kind of damage that it had done.
Did you find, or do you recall a time where that chaotic lifestyle changed?
No, my dad drank himself to death. He was broken and just bound up in his addictions until the day he died. He died in 2007. It changed for me personally when I left the house. My sister, who's 5 years older, left first, of course, went off to college, and then I went off to school. And for years, my sister and I, once we were out of the house, would try to persuade our mother to leave him, get out of this situation. And she always said, if I leave him, he's going to die. I'm sustaining him. And I believe he can be healed. I believe that, he can be okay. And obviously we wanted that for him too. But I think my sister and I had both kind of come to terms with the fact that was not likely to happen in this case. We helped him in the ways that we could. I drove him to AA. We went to rehab multiple times, but it never took with him. And so, yeah, well into my 20s, I guess he died in my very early 30s. But yeah, my sister and I kept trying to persuade mom to leave, and she finally did in 2007. And she was right. A few months later, he was gone because without her around, he really wouldn't eat. He just kind of drank. And he had other issues too. He had cancer and emphysema and multiple cancers. He had multiple strokes. He was a super unhealthy guy. So I don't exactly know what he died of. But her prophecy about him dying without her came true. Unfortunately, she kind of carried the weight of that for the rest of her life.
Wow. That's powerful stuff, Patton. I'm taking a second here to just process all of that because, you were a kid watching this unfold. How did you, well, let me ask you, how did you come out of that phase in your life, and did you carry those traits with you, or is that something that you were able to distance yourself from? I think a lot of times there's people that grow up watching it and they become what they watched, and then there's others that saw it and said, hell no, that's not going to be me. And, quite often it's almost like you're one or the other, to one extreme or the other. So what happened with you?
Yeah. I was becoming him, honestly. I think I was on my way to being my father. I mentioned that my sister was 5 years older. So she went off to college when I was, 12, 13 years old. And when she came home, She moved back in for about a year, and she kind of immediately knew I was up to no good, that I was just, basically being a teenage boy, partying a lot. But, drugs and alcohol were very much in my life. And I was following in my father's footsteps in terms of the habits that I was forming. My sister she was a very fervent Christian. And when she got home, she joined a church right away, and she started persuading me to try to come with her. And this is kind of a long story and part of my story that comes up in the book. But to sum it up here, I would just say that the first answer to your question is what happened to me is that I had a conversion experience. I had a night and day kind of from darkness to light experience when I was like 18, 19 years old. And I sobered up and I got cleaned up and I got very involved in a local church in Colorado. Now, in the long run, I also had problems in faith and that I have a religious journey that got way more complicated, but in the short term, you did clean me up. I found a lot of healing and I found a path, a steady path that I could walk on. And I also found new friends who were living their lives differently. You know what I mean? In the church that I was a part of. Mm-hmm. And it was very helpful for me to find some solid footing. So that was the first turn that my life took, was that I became very serious about my faith for a long season. And that helped me find some direction. But another answer to your question is that my mom, I've already mentioned that she stayed too long. She stayed in this marriage for 40 years, that she probably should have left long before then. But she was the shelter in the storm the whole way through. And my dad was negligent and unavailable. My mom was strong, and she raised me really. She was consistent in her love and in her presence and in her, she was very intentional as a parental figure and forming my character, teaching me how to be kind and how to be loving and how to be disciplined and all that kind of stuff. All the things basically my dad didn't do, my mom did as much as she could. I guess part of what I'm saying here is that I had an amazing sister and an amazing mom. And so they also were both harmed by our situation in various ways, of course, but they were a gift to me, and they helped me, chart a different course than the one that my dad has charted.
Did you know you were becoming your father at the time?
I don't think so. I think I didn't put two and two together, I think that I hated him. And everybody in the world I was in, everybody drinks a lot and smokes pot or whatever. It didn't seem it didn't occur to me that those things could be habit forming for me the same way they were for my father. Everyone thinks they're on top of this stuff until they're not. You know what I mean? And so, and I've had a complicated relationship with substances my whole life through because of my dad. I've had a life where I try to be, I guess I would try to say I keep short accounts on that kind of stuff in my life because of the example that had been set for me my whole life through. I guess I'm watchful. I've probably been too indulgent with myself over the years here and there, even well after all these things happened. But I also try to be very watchful with myself and my habits and be transparent with the people that are closest to me about how that I'm doing. But the other answer to your question, Matt, is that I am a lot like my dad. And that's part of the reason I wrote this book and really what I was working on and writing it was trying to admit to myself that I am his son. And if you just run from the thing that you hate or resent the thing that you come from, you do end up becoming a lot like it often, right? That happens to a lot of people. You end up resembling the thing that you most fear or abhor, at least you can. And so I always am trying to be aware that I come from my dad. I don't get to escape him. He's in me. We share DNA, but we share lots of other stuff too. And so one reason I'm transparent with my friends about my habits with things like alcohol or whatever is that I know that my dad is always very close to me in a way. You know what I mean? And so it's not just that I once was becoming like him and then I stopped. No, I think it's more it's always possible for me to kind of fall into the patterns that he set out for us.
That's good. Tell us about the title of the book, Patton. You titled it kind of appropriately, right? The Father You Get. Did you struggle with that over the years in terms of, thinking about, this is the dad that I was that I was given, and did you have a lot of bitterness toward that? How did that come about with the title and kind of your thoughts around that?
Yeah. So the thing that I was really interested in doing was writing about 4 different aspects of fatherhood. So I actually pitched this book as one called The Four Fathers, Four fathers, kind of a play on word with FORE fathers, kind of a stupid pun, like dads can't get away from making stupid puns. And so the 4 categories were the father that you're born with, the fathers that you create through father figuring, the process of father figuring, God the Father, the idea of the kind of universal concept of God that we might want to strive for and believe in, and then becoming a father yourself as a dad. And I had different complexities and weightiness, I think, around all 4 of those categories. And so for a long time, I thought about, writing a memoir where I would trace my own journey through those 4 aspects of fatherhood. We switched the title for a variety of reasons into what it is now, but the kind of plain spokenness of the title, The Father You Get, is kind of a way of saying we're all stuck with the dad that we're born with in some way. You know what I mean? We don't have any choice in the matter. It's like given to us, sometimes as a gift for people. I hope I'm a gift to my kids. I hope your kids find you to be a gift. But sometimes, you realize whether I like it or not, this is what I had. This is the man that I got, who was either in my home or maybe just gave birth to me and then was out of my life, whatever your story is. And you have to contend with it. You don't get to pretend you don't come from somebody. You don't get to pretend that you don't have, this man's influence on you in some way. And so, the father you get is just kind of a shorthand way of acknowledging that. And I don't know, for me, starting to get on the journey to, like I said, contending with it, dealing with it, reflecting on it, turning it into a story that you can learn from. I write about how when my dad died in 2007, it sounds rude to say that I was delighted. I mean, I was relieved because he was such a weight every day, every week for my sister and my mom and I. And I knew our lives were going to be made easier after he expired. And he just wasn't there for us to have to deal with anymore in a physical way. And so for years, I just didn't think about him, and I kind of enjoyed not thinking about him. And I mean, again, related to the question Matt asked a few moments ago, I think I did kind of have this myth in mind that I was very different and that he had no hold on me. I eventually, I just had to admit to myself that that was false, that this was the dad that I got. Bill Dodd was the dad that I got, and I was his son. And that was just a fact of my life. And I needed to sit with that fact and listen to it and learn from it. The truth is, I didn't know much about him. I mean, partly because he was so negligent and unavailable, but he never talked about himself. And part of what I needed to do was find out who he was and how he became the way that he was. And we're so cut off from his family. My mom died in 2018. So I couldn't ask her. She didn't actually know much about him anyway. She would have said. And then my dad cut us off from his family in a way that made it really hard to track down much information about him. But I needed to know more about the father that I got. And so I spent about a year just doing research and reporting. I took an old school road trip through the pathways of his childhood in the Deep South and tracked down his old drinking buddy. I finally found some family members who were willing to talk to me and share some memories with me about what they knew about him. So the father I got was one I didn't really know, and now I do. Like, I know some things about him that helped me understand why he was the way that he was. And so I think part of the title is just a call to get to know whoever that man is for you. Does that make sense?
Yeah, yeah, definitely.
Yeah, that's powerful, Ryan. I mean, you grew up in a similar situation with being raised predominantly by your mum. Is some of this hitting home for you?
Yeah, yeah. I was in a broken home, and grew up primarily with my mom, and alcohol was a factor in their relationship as well, and my dad struggled with it, and so I've seen kind of the effects of how addiction can kind of take control and steer relationships in the wrong direction, steer lives in the wrong direction, really. So, and
Yeah.
it's something we talked about in the one of the original shows that we did, the original episode. How I had a little struggle with alcohol over the last few years as well, and kind of like Patton said earlier, I've found myself almost in those footsteps and following along down a path that could be pretty destructive. So yeah, I can see a lot of it relating to my situation, and it definitely hits home. So, and I think a lot of guys are gonna find that, that it hits home for them. It might not be alcohol, but it could be something else, some other addiction, or just generational trauma in general, right?
Hmm.
It's really something that we're all dealing with based on the parents, especially the fathers that we had in our lives.
Patton, can you remember the turning point for you? Was it when you became a dad? You've mentioned kids, I don't know how many or how long ago, but was there a turning point for you when you became a father?
Yeah, I mean, becoming a father is a turning point. Like whether you think it's going to be or expect it to be or not, you go from whoever you were before you had kids, and then you go to this. You start becoming, I feel like, this new person. And I write in the book about how I can barely remember the Patton Dodd who existed on, let's see, May 21st, 2003 was the last day I lived without having had a kid. And then we had a kid on May 22nd, who's now 22 years old. And I struggle to remember who that guy was. You know what I mean? And like what he wanted, what he thought he was going to do, what he thought was important, what his priorities were, like career ambition, all that stuff. Like it's shifted because suddenly you've got this vulnerable person who you are responsible for, and the terror of that, especially since I really wasn't prepared. And in addition to not having, I mean, like I said, I had an amazing mom, so I think I knew how to be loving and present because that's how she was. But a lot of the practical stuff, so much about being a man is rooted in the idea of like competence. Like we just know how to, we have skills, we know how to fix things and do things. And I just didn't know any of that stuff. You know what I mean? Like the stuff that you actually need to know how to do, like have a budget, like, like fix a car, buy the right car, and then repair it when it needs repairs, mow your lawn, whatever. Like I was incompetent across a massive range of tasks, of skill sets, and that made me deeply insecure. And so I think it was like it wasn't like an immediate transition to like I was this way and then I became this way, but certainly becoming a father set me on a journey of becoming and of changing into the man that I am today. And it was and is a slow and gradual process because most growth is. But I think that one thing that becoming a father did for me was it just further humbled me. Like, you know what I mean? Like I don't know, man. It takes you to your knees. It's just like it is the terror of it, the sense of responsibility. I think if you embrace that, it opens you up to learning, to makes you humble enough to listen to others, listen to your spouse, your partner for starters, who probably knows more than you do, perhaps, and your friends, mentors, whatever. Like I've tried to be. I think one thing that being a dad from made me do is become a sponge for learning from whoever I could. And um, I I feel like I responded to the kind of crisis of insecurity that it was as I reflect on it, and I write about this a little bit in the book. I responded in part by like just building a network of influence in my life. I didn't know that I was doing this at the time, but over the years I have gathered community, friends, like I said, mentors, men and women who are advisors. Our dinner table has been full many, many, many nights, and our kids know this. Like this is part of how we learn and grow. It's just by listening, doing a lot of listening. And so I've been a wisdom sponge. I'm not saying I've always used it well, but I've certainly tried to find that wisdom wherever I could.
Yeah, I was going to say something before you mentioned the word mentor, and I think that I look back on my childhood and all the people that I've gravitated to as I've grown up. I have very openly had people in my life that I think filled a void. I was the last of five. Dad was nearly 50 when I came around, so of course, by the time, I get to be a teenage boy, that's 65. Back then, 65 was not what it is today,
Right.
and I think I always gravitated towards that mentor type man in my life that I could,
Mm-hmm.
kick a footy with and play some cricket and do some things that, by the time I got around, Dad was probably just tired, you know.
Mm-hmm.
And as you're listing those people, I'm thinking of through my life, all those people that I've
Mm-hmm.
truly been a sponge around of just joy or learning or, activity. And particularly over the last 5 or 6 years, as I've become a dad, I've got a couple of people in my life that I've reached out to quite a lot. One was a guest on the show, Stretch, Jamal Sampson's episode, who's got, 6 or 7 now. I can never keep track of him, but he's been a great resource to me, and so it's just so encouraging to hear that there's someone that can
Mm-hmm.
actually come on the show and say, you know what? If I didn't learn from those around me, if I didn't soak up the wisdom from those around me, I wouldn't be who I am today. And that's not to say
Yeah.
you've said I've made it. You've openly said I'm still trying to use that wisdom. But I'm encouraged by that story just to reinforce, Matt, it's okay to have people around you that you're learning from and gravitating toward, as long as you've maybe, vetted them a little bit, right? You don't want to just follow someone aimlessly, but that's encouraging to me. So I appreciate you sharing the vulnerability of saying, hey, listen, I'm still learning, but I've got people around me that I've chosen to surround myself with to becoming a better dad and now an author, which is huge. So congrats on that, man. I appreciate you sharing that.
Thank you. Thank you. I think a lot about how when my dad died, again, 2007, we had to have my sister's pastor made us have a funeral. We didn't want to have one. But like 3 days later or a week later or whatever, we were in a chapel and like no one came. It was empty. There was no one in this man's life outside his own family. My mom dies in 2018, 11 years later. Her chapel, standing room only. Like it was just like Northern Mississippi funeral chapel. And like, yeah, we couldn't have fit any more people in there. And it was beautiful. And she had a hard life in a lot of ways. And my dad was was one reason why, but not the only reason why. But she filled it with people. She filled it with advisors or people she was serving, or just peers, friends, whatever. That's a pretty obvious picture. It's almost like too poetic, but I want the second funeral. You know what I mean? I want a standing room only funeral. And so part of what that means for me is that I need to keep seeking people out, and have them in my life and not think that I can go it alone. And that includes, that includes people that I serve for sure, and hopefully that I can be a mentor to. But it also includes me continuing to seek out the older, wiser, or just even just people with a different perspective than I have that I need in order to strengthen, my own.
Yeah, that's beautiful because I have found in this last 5 or 6 years of being a dad, you do. You want to take the reins on your own. I
Mm-hmm.
got this. I'm going to do it my way. I know better. And then before you know it, you realize
Absolutely.
you're either doing something that you saw growing up, which some of
Mm-hmm.
it was great, and some of it was not so great. And before you know it, you're becoming, the cliche, right? You're becoming your parents. And there are some things there that I don't want to become, or, people in my life that were influencing things at that age, I don't want to repeat. And I've had to really set the bar a little bit higher on myself and make sure I don't repeat what I saw in the areas that I don't want to repeat. How have you found searching for people over your journey has been? Have you had people receptive to helping you, or are people more willing to tell you where you're going wrong because they like to tell people what to do? What's been the secret? Because it sounds to me like this is almost a niche you've found, which doesn't sound very common when I talk to other, people. How have you managed to make this who you are, and what's the secret to making sure you're getting the right people?
Well, that's a great question, Matt. Huh. That's an interesting reflection to call it a niche that I've created. I don't know. I don't know that I have a secret, but I will tell you something that I have come to believe, which is that we are wired for nurturing. In fact, I talk in the book about the research of a woman at Oxford University named Anna Machen. She's an evolutionary anthropologist, and she has, and studying anthropology and the ancient past and the human brain, she basically argues that the way the species survived, the way Homo sapiens kind of came to be, was through what she calls investing fathers, like dads who stuck around. Instead of like, primates, impregnate the female and then like leave, right, and go whatever. But what research suggests that what, again, caused the species to survive is that the clans started to stick together. Mom and dad would stay around, and the dads would invest as well in hunting and gathering, bringing back food, but also playing with the young and offering connection through that way. And so our brains are wired for it. And if that's true, if we're wired for nurturing, I think I also got to believe that it's available. Like nurturing is out there. And I did something really stupid this summer. I went to go pick up a couch that my wife had bought on Facebook Marketplace. I drove up. It was like a Sunday afternoon, like I didn't want to do it. It was like the last thing I needed that day was to go pick this thing up for her, but I had to go do it. She had bought it. I had to go pick it up. I put it in my truck, and I was rushing, and I didn't strap it down in the back of my truck. And I'm like, and we wedged it in. It's going to be fine. Yeah, yes, exactly. You see where this is going. So I'm on the interstate, and a big gust of wind comes up and lifts the sofa out of my truck, and it tumbles on the interstate behind me. And I crest this hill right as it's happening. So I can't see what happened behind me, but I just know I've just lost a sofa going 80 miles an hour on the interstate in Texas. And I take the next exit, and I come back around to go pick it up or push it off the road or whatever. And of course now there's a massive like backup of cars. No one had had an accident around it yet though. I was feeling okay. But by the time I looped around and got behind it, I saw a car in front of me swerve to miss it. I guess he was looking down, didn't see it coming, and he spun. He hit one end of the interstate, did like 2 donuts, hit the other end of the interstate, demolished his car. I saw this accident happen. I thought I've killed someone. Like it was an awful moment to cut to the chase here and to relieve everyone's tension. And this guy was okay. Him and his girlfriend inside the car, airbags deployed, of course. Not a scratch on them. His car was totaled. But he could have been much more seriously injured, and other people could have as well, because I didn't strap the frickin' sofa down the way that you're supposed to. And honestly, I didn't really know how to. This is, again, one of my many areas of incompetency is that I struggle to use those stupid ratchet straps. So I pull over and I tell the policeman that's my sofa. And he goes, so do you know how to secure your load? And I was like, actually, I don't. And he goes, well, let me help you. And we got the demolished sofa. We put it back in my truck, and he showed me how to use my ratchet straps the right way. And he was very like stern, but kind. And like, this is how you do this. And make sure you never, ever don't strap your load down again. Like, now you know how, and you'll never do this again, right? And I was like, yes, sir, I will never do it again. So the point of that story is that like, nurturing is out there. You know what I mean? Like there's all kinds of things to say about that story and things that could have gone wrong. But like the lesson I got, like this man like fathered me a little bit on the side of the road and like kind of put his arm around my shoulder and was like, look, man, there's a way to do this. And I'm going to show you how. And so now you can take this with you. And I kind of believe that like that kind of support, and I know this is like maybe a little too rose-colored glasses, but that kind of support and care and instruction is available. And I just think we're made for nurturing if we look for it. So yeah, that's just a belief that I have, and I'm going to live as if it's true.
I'm blown away. For those that are watching on the YouTube, they're going to see my eyes get bigger and bigger and bigger. And that's probably why you rushed to the end of the story there. But I was hoping it would go that way, of course, because that's horrifying, right? And,
Totally.
you should probably tell us what the missus said when you got home.
Yeah.
It wasn't as nurturing?
Well, she wasn't surprised because I'm a bonehead. I do stuff like this a lot. Like I'm a bit absent-minded. I mean, this is actually really at the heart of The Father You Get. I write a lot about my absent-mindedness and a story that I have of my childhood where I broke my father's lawnmower and how that story has kind of haunted me my whole life through because of, the way it exposed my incompetence. And so my wife is used to it and it gets really frustrated with me, but also, I don't know, man, we're 25, 26 years into marriage now and kind of know how to deal with each other. She gives me grace and she was frustrated, but it's not the first time she's been frustrated with me doing something like that. And I am now, when we go out and run an errand, I mean, she buys and sells things on Facebook Marketplace all the time, and I secure those freaking loads. Like I over secure them, and so she knows now that she can trust me to go grab anything, and it's all might be one bag of groceries, but it's going to be strapped down.
You know, it's funny, we've been on this not even 45 minutes and I'm overwhelmed and had chills multiple times in your stories, but I've really gotten a sense of the humility that you've had going through this. And even it sounds like I've got to get this book now and read through some of these anecdotes, but you've got this humility about you that I think, looking at it from the outside in, is what has drawn the right people into your life at the right times to be able to nurture you because you are open to it, you're receptive. You know, you're putting out an energy there, and the Almighty Father is watching you, right? We talked about those four fathers, right? The Almighty is definitely going to bring you the right people to guide you when
Yeah.
that's your default, right? Is that how you felt as you've gone through and just shared a couple of stories? And listen, you could have had any, you said it was a sheriff or a police officer or someone.
Hmm.
I mean, they could have done all sorts of different things, but it almost
Yeah.
seems like even within that story, you got the right one
I know.
that understood what had happened and still was able to give you something that now is going to help you moving forward, right? It's almost like humility is the theme of who you are now.
That's beautiful. I agree. Yeah. I didn't like the things I'm talking to y'all about and the writing about the network of like nurturing that I have created in my life. It's not something that I knew about myself before I started writing, even though I think it's been true for a long time. It's only upon reflection and like writing this story that I can see it and see evidence of it. And so I do think, I don't know if it's because of humility or if it's just a gift of God that I have nothing to do with. But I do think that I have had the recurring grace of, yeah, of nurturing and care. And yeah, there are more stories like this in the book. There's also a flip side to it. And I talk about how I have sometimes put myself under the influence of like father figures that I probably gave too much power to. You know what I mean? Like I was a little too, I couldn't stand on my own 2 feet. And I think that's something that you have to be careful with in these situations is that you kind of also, yeah, keep yourself. And when you are as insecure as I am, and when you are as, you know, much of a mess as I have been, you can be taken advantage of as well. And sometimes, or just end up in a weird power dynamic where you're not able to tell someone no, you're not able to think for yourself. And I think I've fallen into that mistake a couple times throughout my life. But the larger truth is what you said, that I have been given, yeah, this continual gift of grace, of mentorship, of leadership. And I do think it's because I've been receptive to it. I think it's really risky not to be, you know? Like my dad, again, no one came to his funeral because no one knew him. If he had just put himself in someone's care, if he had just been honest with someone about what he was going through, I think it would have done him tremendous good. And he never really took that chance. And I think it was part of his undoing.
Sounds to me like there's almost a deep part of you that knows that and
Yeah.
swore the two funerals to create this
Yeah.
dichotomy of two ways to live. And even though you've got his DNA trying to drag you back into what happened to him, you've got this other vision of this funeral of your mother's that's
Yeah.
trying to drag you into the humility and the giving side. And you being on this podcast is part of that when you don't know us, right? You don't know our stories. And so I'm
Yeah.
watching this wrestle within. What would you say to those guys that are really, maybe they're not on the other side of this? And that's not to say you feel like you're out the other side of the chaos, but there's guys out there that are going to listen to this, and even women that they're in the middle of that, where they're trying to make a decision. Do I stay? Do I go? Am I talking to the right mentor or do I need to find another one? Do I ask for help or do I try and do it alone? What would you say to the people that are out there going through this? It's almost like you got these two voices battling over your soul. How did you kind of narrow it down to be
Yeah.
able to do what you're doing? Is there something that you could kind of narrow down into a helpful kind of answer here to help people really like, all right, that's great, Patton, but what do I do? How do I do it? They want the answers. Like, give me the answers, right? Do they need to get your books? Um, or do they need to just hold on for dear life? Or is it a time where, like you said about your mum, it's like, hey, it's time to go. It's time to move on.
Wow. Yeah. I think that it's vital to have one or two people in your life that you can tell anything to. And if you don't have those people, you need to find them. And then you asked how do you know if it's the right person? That's scary. I don't know. That's tricky because you do have to be careful about who those people are. I really believe in like listening closely to your gut at some level. Often like there is a spiritual sense in which we know deep down, I think often if we're in harm's way or if we're in the way of light and care. And so I think getting quiet enough within yourself to ask yourself, ask God, is this healthy? Is this relationship good? Is it beneficial and productive, or is it wrong? And like, listen for that answer. Try to trust the voice within yourself, the still small voice within you to have an answer to that question. Because if it's the wrong relationship, then yes, you do need to be brave enough to break it off and find the genuinely trustworthy person who you can say anything to. And I think the way you know if they're trustworthy is partly like, do they judge you or do they receive you? Do they respond to you with love and care? Are they like faithful to keep showing up in spite of your crap, whatever it is? Or are they fickle? And sometimes there's people who are really charismatic and they're kind of fun to be around, but they're actually fickle, or they're like, based on experience that you really can't trust them. Like once you see that, it's definitely time to move on and find someone else. But the main response I have to your question, Matt, is yeah, it's really important to have at least one or two people that you can be totally naked in front of about who you really are, darkest thoughts, deepest fears. And if you don't have them, then you're probably in some danger.
Good stuff.
Yeah, that's a great answer. I think we could all take a moment when we get it, or if we're not getting it, maybe make the time. I know I feel a lot better when I do take that quiet time and I do listen to that small, still quiet voice. And I've, over the years, realized that to have those people around and people I can lean on and trust, and Ryan's been one of those over the last 7 months of my journey, which has been fantastic. And, sounds to me like you're out there doing it for others. And I've been blessed by both of you, today and over the last 7 months. And so thank you to you both. That's a lot to really process, but it sounds like we on the right track, Ryan. I know we've talked a little bit about this, reaching out to someone and making sure that you don't do it alone. And that's partly why we called this podcast Strength to Overcome, with a 2 in the middle. And
Yeah.
Patton, you inadvertently just reinforced why we're doing this and the title of this concept and the community we're trying to build. So thank you for being a part
Awesome.
of it today. Ryan, you want to wrap up and get everyone onto those books? Give them the titles again, can you? I'm a little hazy on those
Yeah,
titles.
so we'll link the book in the show notes so folks can jump on and grab a copy. And Patton, where can folks find you? Are you on social media?
Yeah, I mean, pattondodd.com is like a decent starting point, but I'm on Instagram mostly. I am not good at social media. It's not my favorite thing at all, but I am on it. And I am I am a little present there. I have a Substack. So if you want to hear more of this kind of stuff on a more regular basis, if you go to Substack, my Substack is called The Father You Get. If you just search for my name there, though, you could subscribe to the Substack. And then the book is available, wherever you want to buy books. Really, any bookstore in your area should be able to get it for you if they don't have it already. And then it's on Audible if you're an audiobook person.
Awesome.
Love
Yeah,
it.
we'll put those links in the show notes. Patton, thanks again for being on the show. We really appreciate having you and hearing your insights. And I know a lot of people are going to get some great nuggets from it. So thank you.
Yes, thanks to you both. Appreciate y'all very much. This has been great.
Thanks, Patton. Stay strong, everyone, and check out his material. Please do. It's inspired me, and we're still in the episode. So I'll catch you guys next week for number 30.
See ya.
Cheers.